For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon Hove. In light of the recent high-profile killing of a community protester, Andries Tatane, in Ficksburg, South Africa, I'm with Gareth Newham of the Institute of Security Studies to discuss the issue of police brutality. You say in a recent article that many police officials would not have been shocked at the beating of Andries Tatane. Why do you say this? Are you shocked at the killing?
Well, I was very shocked at his killing. I was also shocked at the beating. But why I say that many police officials, when they'd seen that footage initially, would not be shocked by it is because most police officials think that if you resist the police official, if somebody's trying to arrest you and you fight back at them, which people saw on the television sets, and he started getting hit by truncheons and shot by rubber bullets, a lot of police officials don't think that that is necessarily wrong. They think that you're questioning their authority, and they're quite used to using violence to assert their authority in certainly public order protests and in a range of incidents. And so we're getting a large number of complaints from different parts of the public involved in different police encounters where the police are quick to use violence. And this has been going on for many years. This is not new. So most police officials, and I spoke to some the day after, when they first saw that footage before he was killed or he died, thought that he was getting what he deserved for fighting back.
You mentioned that the current referral of incidents to the ICD for investigation won't address the underlying management, structural, cultural and training problems that are contributing to the growing problem of police brutality. What are these underlying problems?
Okay, well, first of all, the growing problem is that there's been 100%, more than 100% increase in the numbers of people shot dead by police in the 4-year period between 2006 and 2009, 2005-06. It went up from about 281 people shot dead in 2005-2006 financial year, and in 2008-2009 it was about 584 people. It's then in 2009-2010 remained about 524, very high. So those are the figures of the police that are collected by the Independent Complaints Directorate about numbers of police, people being shot dead by police. Every time somebody dies as a result of police action or in police custody, the ICD has to investigate, so they keep these statistics. So that's how we know that it's an increase and it's a growing problem. There's also been increases of complaints to the ICD about the assaults going up quite a lot, criminal complaints about serious assaults going up, complaints of torture going up. So there's a number of indicators there that policing is becoming more violent and more brutal. And so we know it's a big problem. Now, the ICD has been set up to simply investigate each individual incident to check to see whether there's any criminal law that's been broken or any police regulations that have been broken. Is there police misconduct? So they investigate. If they find that the law has been broken, there's a criminal charge, whether it's assault, GBH or murder, they then put a docket together and hand it to the National Prosecuting Authority, who then decides whether they will prosecute or not. If they don't find that there's been a criminal broken, but there might have been regulations broken or misconduct, they will make recommendations back to police management to say, you must discipline this person. But they're there to provide an independent civilian-led investigation of a complaint by a member of the public against a police official. So to stop a situation where the police investigate themselves. They don't do much more than that. So even if they investigate 10 instances at a single police station where somebody keeps on ignoring standing orders and that leads to an incident of brutality or a shooting, they look at each incident as an individual isolated case, that specific action must be taken against particular police officials because a specific event happened. They don't say, why is this event happening? Why do we keep on seeing the same thing happen over and over again? That's why I would say the ICD will never be able to solve that problem. The shortcomings in the police, the way that they're led, managed, the training they got, how they recruit people to become police officials, the kind of support they're given if they're undergoing stress, are not ICD issues. Those issues are managerial issues, management issues. The leadership of the police organization has to make sure that their members are properly recruited, trained, supported, and given direction and guidance when they're dealing with the complexities of policing. So what we're seeing now, the outcome of failures in that management, failures in that leadership, are resulting in these increases in killings by police, torture cases that we're getting to hear about, general brutality. So the response that this is an isolated incident is wrong, and that is not unusual to South Africa. We've got 6 to 7 decades of quite intensive police research in different contexts around the world showing us that when you start having problems of brutality and torture, your problems are not because you've just got some isolated people that are doing bad things, or you've got rotten apples, as often referred to. There's systemic, structural and managerial failures in that organization, and the outcome is corruption, brutality and a whole range of other problems that you have with policing.
The SAPS doesn't possess adequate skills and capacity to professionally respond to a number of the challenges it faces, including maintaining public order. What effect do you think this will have on the increasing number of service delivery protests? Do you think there will simply be more civilian deaths at the hands of the very people who are called to protect us?
Well, we know that the death rate as a result of police shootings has gone up dramatically, so that's already happening. That is not new, and it's a very high rate. What we do see is that is probably as a result of poor training, of lack of specialization. The specialization problem really started under Jackie Selebi, the previous National Commissioner of Police, when he started shutting down all the specialized units. He looked at the problem that most or 90% of the crime is reported to police stations. And so very simplistically thought, well, you must improve the capacity at police stations. All the specialized units were sitting at a higher level called the area level. So the Johannesburg area office for the South African Police Service would provide specialized functions to maybe 21 police stations. So you'd have a group of people who would be doing specialist anti-corruption police and specialist anti-corruption targeted police officials, specialist investigations to do with child rape or sexual abuse. Public order policing units would be at that level. So very simplistically, they thought, well, let's just shut these units down and take all those members down to all the police stations. Then all police stations would have this capacity. The problem is that the specialization doesn't work like that. You need teams of people to work together. You can then mentor new members in. You can provide awareness needed. It's not always needed all the time. Public order policing isn't something that happens at each police station every day of the week, or even most days of the week, or most weeks. It happens at specific areas, and so you need it to be at a high level. So in that restructuring process, the intention was good, to strengthen the capacity of police stations, but the way it was done was bad. It was not piloted, it was not researched, there was no evidence that it was going to work, and they didn't test it to see what would be the impact. They just did it. And they lost a lot of skills and specialization. One of the units that was restructured or suffered a lot of because of this was the public order policing units. Its numbers of police professionals who were involved in this reduced by half in 2006 to 2007. So suddenly you had 50% of your units gone. The others were doing basic patrol work, stop and searches and stuff at police stations. They weren't doing public order policing anymore, so they stopped being skilled in that, stopped getting that kind of experience. Then you started seeing a big increase over the next 3 to 4 years of public protests, especially violent protests. And they didn't really do much to address that at the time. They just sent ordinary station level people to go in. And that's where a lot of these shootings started occurring. With the FIFA World Cup and the need to be professional and need to see the whole, the eyes of the world on us, they then hastily re-established these units and started giving people refresher courses trained by the French, giving them body armor and up-to-date equipment. But very at the last minute, a lot of those people are still back to doing general policing work. So that kind of specialization has meant that a lot of police officials that go out into these situations are not experienced. And certain kinds of policing is not something you can just read about in a book or do a role play. You really need to do it quite a few times to understand the complexities involved in it. And public order policing is there to prevent violence from occurring. When public order police arrive, they should be seen as a neutral arbitrator. The communities are not protesting against the police. The communities often have other legitimate concerns to do with failures in service delivery, and they want to make their voices heard. They don't believe the government is listening to them or their ward councillors are listening to them, so they take the streets. They might be breaking the laws because they barricade the streets, block off public motorways, burn tyres. Those things in themselves can be reduced or ended if there's basic communication and negotiation between the police leaders and the leaders of those protests. That is how they should approach these things. But more and more what we're seeing is, and this is coming out of this movement of a police service to a police force, is this idea that you don't negotiate and build consent in communities. That's what a police service does. A police force with military ranks sees the enemy out there as somebody to be destroyed. So as soon as you start breaking the law, you're no longer somebody you negotiate with. You become the enemy. The war against crime becomes targeted at those individuals. So very quickly you move from a negotiated way of dealing with a conflict to using maximum force to try and destroy your enemies. And that's the kind of mindset that since has been raised actually in 2006 and re-emphasized in 2009 with the Zuma administration, is starting to permeate throughout the police agency. So a lot more police officials thinking that it's okay to use force, that it's expected from them, and that they'll be protected if they do. This idea that you negotiate, that you try and build consent, that you listen to communities is something that was in the past with community service. The police service did that, not a police force. And that sort of fundamental ideological paradigm is now taking hold in the police. It's always there in police agencies. They are paramilitary agencies by nature. But democracies try and constrain that and direct that into a high level of professionalism. What's happened with this latest administration is to ignore that and remove the constraints without putting in place the need to be professional and so forth. So that is why we are not going to, we're likely to see a lot, well, this Tatane thing will cause a lot of anger and outrage. The police are more likely to prevent the media from covering these things now. They are then to change the fundamental ideology that is still being promoted by their chief of police and by the government.
It has been said that President Jacob Zuma appointed General Bheki Cele to show South Africans that police must be feared and respected. However, fear rarely brings respect. How do you think the police can obtain the respect they deserve from the South African public?
Well, the police can easily obtain respect when they act professionally, when they treat people fairly, when they act with restraint, when they demonstrate that they are professionals. They take their job seriously, they have pride in themselves, pride in their uniform, pride in the work they're doing, and they're doing it for the right purposes. Then public have huge respect for police, and we've seen various examples in South America and other parts where the police are seen in that way, because you're not allowed to get away with acting like a thug. They know that the systems are in place that if a police official gets out of line, breaks the law, breaks rules, commits corruption, the systems are there to make sure that there's a thorough and swift response. Persons held accountable. They'll relook at the training involved. They'll relook at their systems for recruiting and managing people. If you don't have those in place, and we don't, we have very weak training systems, we have very weak accountability, our disciplinary system is very weak, and our managerial system is very weak. They're not held liable for what their members do, so they don't need to really do much. They just make sure they're there and that they try and sort of manage through acquiescence or fear. And that fear means you're going to be in trouble if you don't listen to me, as opposed to let's jointly decide which is the best course of action to solve a particular policing problem. That lack of professionalism in the police is what leads to arbitrary brutality, because the police are the expression of state power, the use of force. The only people who are legitimately allowed to use violence in any democracy are the police. Other groups that use violence, vigilantes, PAGA and that, are not doing it legitimately. They don't have the state's mandate to do it so. The police are the state's expression of that. So the state has to show that they must constrain that, and they can only be used in certain circumstances. When you don't have very high professional standards, then you have a situation where police make up their own minds when they use it, and very uneven usage. And so the way that the police are using force unevenly and poorly in South Africa at the moment is one of many problems. It's a problem why vehicles don't often come to crime scenes, why people don't often answer the phone, why detectives don't often interview people who are witnesses to crime scenes, why cases are rejected from court. Well, a whole lot of problems to do with the forensic backlogs. The use of force is just the sharp end of a policing problem. It's the most noticeable because people get killed, people get hurt, their bodies, there's the allegations of torture, there's evidence. But that's just the most noticeable element of a police agency that is not being professionally led and professionally managed.
You support the call for a commission of inquiry into the Tatane incident. What do you think will be achieved by such a commission?
A commission of inquiry has been used effectively in various parts of the world to improve policing. New York City had a huge corruption scandal in 1994, which resulted in a modern commission of inquiry. The idea then was that they already had previous corruption scandals, and the police leadership at that stage weren't able to deal with it. First of all, they didn't recognize there was a problem. They would say, oh, these are just isolated incidents, don't worry, we'll investigate those police officials. But it kept on happening. So then the city of New York, the mayor said we need to have something more than that. We can't, this is a complex problem, maybe the police leadership there themselves can't deal with it. So you set up a commission inquiry under an independent judge. You can start looking at what the systemic failures are. The police management often are not able to fix those things on their own by the time it becomes a systemic problem, because if they had, there wouldn't be problems. And these are not always easy things to do. So it's not necessary that the management team themselves are inherently bad or wrong. It's just that they have been in the situation for so long, and it's been happening so slowly that they can't see where the blind spots are. They make assumptions about what's going on. They're not willing to look at certain problems. And that's not just policing, that's all organizations. This is classic stuff that happens if where you need external people to look at a problem to help you see it through new eyes. We have a situation here which has been occurring for a number of years now on a range of areas. Brutality is one area, corruption is another big area. The police management are not able to get on top of these issues. They're getting worse. Now, rather than let these current leaders try and deal with it on their own, we are calling for an independent inquiry to bring in a number of other experts, to look internationally to see how they solve these problems, with the police, with international experts, with independent people who might have something to say about this, who've researched it or analyzed it, then put forward a clear plan of action about what needs to be done over the next 3 to 5 years. That everybody can understand this is how we're going to fix policing, this is how we're going to reduce corruption, how we're going to reduce brutality, improve professionalism, improve services to people. And that the milestones and systems that support that are very clearly articulated and understood by everybody. Therefore, the police have a clear plan of action that everybody agrees to. Right now, the police do their own plan of action. They don't consult with anybody about this whatsoever. There's no way that they collectively agree on anything with other departments in the criminal justice system or with communities, anybody. They just do it themselves. So we don't know what their plan of action really is. The documents are there, but they're not very clear about what the milestones are. We don't know where they get to their targets, for instance. So they will suddenly say in 1 year that they must reduce violent crime by 7 to 10%. Next year they change it from 4 to 7%. But they can't explain to Parliament themselves, the police, where they got those targets from or how they reached those targets. So clearly the plan isn't useful for them, it's not useful for us. So a commission of inquiry will be arbitrated by an independent judge who over hopefully no longer than a year, maybe even as short as 6 months, look at the fundamental challenges that police leadership are facing, put in place a series of steps that can be clearly understood by everybody so they can be monitored and make sure that they're actually being implemented to fix the problems. In which case you'll have a much more professional police agency that is supported and understood to be so by the broader community. That's why we're calling for commission of inquiry. Arresting a few police officers because they're involved in what are currently called isolated events is not going to fix the problem. It's just going to delay the problem, and we're going to see the problem repeating itself over and over again, as it has been doing now for a number of years.
Thank you so much for your time.
Donate now and give 15 Rand a month. SMS JOIN to 41486.